So today what we're going to do is start talking about Ronald Reagan. Okay, and Ronald Reagan, we usually associate him and his presidency really with the entirety of the 80s. The 80s are Reagan. Okay, so what we're going to do for today is look at this whole idea of a revolution. Did Ronald Reagan's presidency amount to what we would view as a revolution? Think back to our American Revolutionary War, the change of government then. Think about the nonviolent revolutions that we've had, like the Revolution of 1800, when we have the first time a sitting president loses and actually leaves with John Adams to Thomas Jefferson. Just kind of on those sorts of things. Does this amount to the idea of what a true revolution is? Does he revolutionize American society, American politics? What is his role in this idea of a Reagan revolution? That's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move forward if this will work. There we go. All right. So by 1980, we are in dire need of I don't want to say new leadership. We've been getting new leadership. Nixon was new leadership. Ford was new leadership. Carter was new leadership. What we wanted really was a successful leader, something that we hadn't had for a long time. We had LBJ that was looked at as a failure because of Vietnam. We have um, LBJ, Nixon, who's a failure because of Watergate. We have Ford and stagflation. We have Carter and the Iran hostage situation. And so finally, we have this situation with Ronald Reagan where we need somebody that is going to check off a lot of boxes. And that's what we're going to kind of get into here in a second. Stagflation's still going on. There's still a lot of stuff. The Cold War, remember, even though we don't talk about it very much anymore, the Cold War is still happening in this time period. Okay, and the détente, if you remember, it's no longer around. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and so the détente, that easing of relations, had gone back to, I guess, a form of containment or hostility. So here we're going to need some new leadership. Okay, so we already kind of talked about this change of the new right and the new left, but now we're going to have this Reagan revolution in the right. Okay, and remember, we always talk about successful political parties have to have a coalition of voters, different types of voters that vote the same way. And the conservative movement that Nixon started and Reagan really maximized created the modern Republican Party, the Republican Party that Donald Trump is a part of now. It mirrors a lot of the same things that happened back in the 80s with this new right conservative phenomenon. So let's go ahead and break it down a little bit. All right. So at the very beginning, they are conservative. Remember, they want to shrink the size of the government, so they want to cut entitlement programs. And to them, entitlement programs basically means welfare programs and social programs. The Great Society, for instance, they want to see a lot of those. A lot of those programs slashed and cut. They believe civil rights had gone too far, that they are creating a situation where minorities actually have a better chance and a head start. So they attack affirmative action as being reverse discrimination. They attack a lot of these things and want to see change. Okay, so that's one aspect of this new conservative movement. Okay, so the second one, and remember, these are all, they're not necessarily the same person. These are different people who would vote for the same party. Okay, so this one is promoting family values and patriotic ideals. These are the ones that are kind of mixing and putting together good Christianity and Christian morals, family values, with the idea of what it is to be quote unquote American, the American identity. So devout Christians are upset with what they view as a decline in morality. So think back to the 1920s and that clash of cultures between the rural, more conservative faction of the country and then the urban, modern, more progressive. That's kind of the same thing that's happening here. The new right is going to promote prayer in schools, tough punishment for all crimes. Oh, sorry, it's late. And then, of course, they're going to attack abortion. They're going to attack the Equal Rights Amendment, which you learned about last unit, if you remember. And then they're going to attack homosexuality. Of course, that to them goes absolutely against the Christian ideals of family values. So this is going to be another thing that the Republican Party is going to kind of take the mantle for. Okay, now if we move forward one more, now we're going to look more at this idea of the moral majority. The evangelists are going to get in on politics in this time period. Okay, they promote family values and they start to raise money for conservative politicians. So the Christian evangelists are now going to start playing in the political sphere. Okay, so this is kind of a change. It's a partnership. Okay, now and then we're also going to see business growth. They want to lower taxes. They want free enterprise. They don't want government interference. That, the buzzword there is deregulation. They want to deregulate, kind of go back towards the Gilded Age style of business. Not all the way, but deregulate, get rid of some of those regulations. Okay. And then lastly, they think that we look weak to the rest of the world after Carter, after us getting out of Vietnam, all those sorts of things. They want us to become the superpower status of the world again, that we are number one. So this is that new right conservative movement. So this is the Reagan Revolution. Okay, we talked a lot about that. Hopefully you're following along. Okay, now. So here's your election in 1980. Let's finally get to the election. Reagan runs on a platform of all of those things that we just talked about: lower taxes, less government, family values. We are going to, as he so eloquently put it, first, make America great again. Okay, you might recognize that motto. Trump didn't come up with it. All right, he kind of acquired it from his own party and from Ronald Reagan here, from the 1980 campaign, where he wants to make America great again. That conservative ideal, and he is very successful at kind of painting that brand of bringing America back. Okay, now, so here it is, 1980. He destroys Carter. Of course, Carter wins Georgia because Carter's from Georgia. He wins a couple more states, but for the most part, this is an overwhelming victory for Reagan, and it's a devastating blow for a president who was actually in office, an incumbent president. You don't see this kind of loss very often. Okay, so here we go. We're going to see immediate budget cuts. He is going to accomplish what he said he was going to do. He's going to cut some Medicaid. He's going to cut welfare. He's going to cut job training programs. He's going to deregulate. He's going to stimulate business. He's going to reduce the government's control over business. He's going to reduce taxes. He's going to appoint 4 conservatives to the Supreme Court, one being the first female justice in American history, but he's going to shape the future of the Supreme Court by putting these 4 conservative-minded justices on the bench of course, 9 justices. So this is a big deal. Okay, maybe this will work. It's freezing. Uh-oh. Just bear with me. Hope y'all are doing well. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's just move on because now I'm scared of my PowerPoint. So here's Reaganomics. Here's your next thing. So if you're taking notes, I hope that you got down what that new conservative movement is, the new right. Now, this is his answer to stagflation. Okay, it's called Reaganomics. In other words, it is supply side trickle down economics. And we've talked about that before. In 1980, we're in a horrible situation with interest rates, with the value of the dollar, with inflation. It's a horrible situation in America because of that stagflation. And so he is going to basically create a situation where he's going to reverse where we were according to him, on the Laffer curve. Okay, so he believes that we are suffering because our taxes are too high, and taxes are so high that people don't have enough money to spend. And if people don't have money to spend, then the economy can't grow, hence it being stagnant. So he wants to move to the point where we are taxing below the point where it is kind of this equilibrium. We're having more money in people's pockets so that they can spend more. The only way to reduce taxes is to reduce programs. And so that's what he was doing with cutting the welfare programs and those things. So hold on to this for a minute because we're going to talk about it again. But on paper, this looks pretty good. Okay, but let's move on. All right, so he's going to pass a 25% tax cut, stimulate spending, increase production, lower prices. It all sounds good. It all works. Reagan believed in this idea of supply side economics. And if you see here, immediately upon his kind of creation of supply side economics, it seems to be working. Okay, unemployment starts to go down. We start to see a good situation here. Okay, stagflation ends and the economy starts to boom. We have 16 million gained jobs. Unemployment falls below 6%. Inflation declined to 4%. He is a genius. The problem is it's hard to sustain. Okay, especially if you're trying to outproduce the Soviet Union in the Cold War, which is what we're going to get to right now. All right, so defense spending, basically, he's going to increase it. He's going to increase it in order to restore our place as a superpower in the world. We're going to increase our spending on defense. We're going to start spending all this money on creating a stockpile of weapons in order to fight this Cold War against the Soviet Union, especially after they just invaded Afghanistan a couple of years prior to this. Okay. And so, again, we're going to see all of this spending into the defense budget. Okay. And here you can see, because of military spending and cutting all of those taxes, all right, we have huge yearly deficits, meaning that we are spending more money than we're making. Okay. And you can see that the deficit goes up during Reagan's presidency. It spikes right here in 1992, which is the beginning of Bill Clinton's presidency. We're going to talk about him in a little bit, a couple days. Okay, so you can see right here is Reagan, right here is George Bush Sr., and then right here is Bill Clinton. And you can see that the deficit really goes down in Clinton's presidency. He changes things quite a bit in the 1990s, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so family values and concerns. Very quickly, let's just kind of run through this. The conservative values, how's he going to hold on to this? Okay, the problem here is that because of the cuts to all of these social programs, we're going to see an increase in school dropout rates. We start to fall when it comes to some of these important factors in the American education system. Okay, we're decreasing funding, Head Start, things like that. Okay, homelessness is going to increase during Reagan's presidency. Attacks on affirmative action, kind of this increase in hostility in America is going to become on the rise again. And then, of course, urban minority poverty is going to increase as well during Reagan's presidency. Plus, we're going to see the first documented cases of AIDS in the United States of America. And the Reagan administration moves very slowly on it, partly because of the idea that it is primarily in the homosexual community. Okay, so they are not comfortable with that. All right. And because of all of the massive budget cuts, they just did not have the ability to respond to an outbreak of a disease of this magnitude. Okay. And of course, it starts in San Francisco among homosexual men. And so there's just a very slow, I guess, a very slow reaction by the federal government in this disease that ran rampant through the late 80s and into the 90s. Now, Let's just keep moving. Now, lastly, I think we're almost done. I know I've talked way too much today, but all you got to do is listen and take notes, and that's all you got to do for today. Okay, so family values. Here's old Nancy Reagan, and this is where you're going to see the just say no, the anti-drug initiative of Reagan's presidency that's spearheaded by, of course, the First Lady. Okay, crack cocaine was first introduced in the United States in the 1980s. It led to what Reagan called the crack epidemic. Sorry, the crack epidemic. And then, of course, the war on drugs and the Just Say No program, which is going to come out of this. DARE, some of you might remember that from elementary school. DARE is going to come out of the Just Say No program and the war on drugs and all those sorts of things. Okay? And then, of course, he has his reelection in 1984. Of course, it's him and George Bush Sr., and then his opponents, Walter Mondale, and then the very first female to be on a primary ticket is going to be Geraldine Ferraro. But of course, it is an enormous victory for Reagan. A lot of Reagan Democrats, Democrats that leave the party and actually move into the Republican Party. They may vote for Democrats and other down ticket offices like senators or mayors or governors, things like that. But they voted for Reagan at the top of the ticket. Okay, and that's it. That's pretty much all we need to talk about today. Tomorrow, we will move on with some of the foreign policy aspects of Reagan's presidency. I hope that all of y'all are doing well. I hope I didn't bore you too much. I wish that we were still in the classroom. I really am disliking digital learning, but we will persevere. Remember, if you need anything at all, just ask. Send me a reminder, send me an email, and that's pretty much it. All right, guys. I miss you. Talk to you later.